Hello, everybody. So glad you're here. Hi, Kay. And hi, Avro. What is Flynn up to with a martial law insinuation? And hello, everyone. I think Flynn wants to go back to jail. Maybe. Maybe Barr will be motivated to have him arrested. And Trump would have to pardon him again. Dale Weaver says, hey, Kay, glad to see you too. Hi, Dale. Kay says, hey, Dale. Kay says, shared. Avril says, nice to see you too. And Avril says, shared. Wow. Wow. Okay. Avril says, lost in depth visuals. Depth visuals? What are depth visuals? Anyway, there we go. Please share. I have already shared this fairly widely, but please share wherever you can, as much as you can. And remember, I need as much help as I can get. A lot of competition these days. Everybody's out with good Zoom programs and various other things going on. And here there's only my analysis and commentary on the news, after all. So I need all the help I can get. Even though this is one of the only in-depth shows on the news around, I think. So, there was one thing that caught my eye, okay, before I get into remaking the economy stuff. There was one thing that caught my eye, perhaps because I shared the experience, but I certainly wanted to share it with you. And I'm going to share the screen. I picked up this article in LA Progressives. Of course, it did not originate there, but I thought it expressed things in a perfect way. The article is called, I Want to Give You Money, but You Must Promise to Fight for Me. And there are Raphael Warnock and John Ossoff with the American flag, in between the two of them. They're waving, of course. And the author says, I can't be the only person receiving 30 fundraising emails a day from John Ossoff's campaign and another 30 from Raphael Warnock's. A Democratic win of 2 more seats in the Senate should be a wonderful accomplishment after years of suffering under Republican control. But when I checked the websites of both Democratic candidates for the Georgia seats, I'm baffled. Both do have some good policy positions, no question. Both are way more progressive than either Loeffler or Perdue. I don't know if it's Loeffler or Loeffler. I don't know how she pronounces it. To me, it's Loeffler. But neither supports the Medicare for All, which poll after poll shows the majority of Americans want. Not to mention 88% of Democrats, right? I presume that they're sending most of these funding solicitations to people they think are Democrats. But neither supports Medicare for all, which poll after poll shows the majority of Americans want. They use words like access, quote unquote, and affordable, quote unquote. That's not good enough. Exactly my thinking when I get these emails. And by the way, I've checked their websites too, and I know they don't support Medicare for all. I don't think Ossoff supports a Green New Deal either, if I'm not mistaken. I think that Warnock maybe supports that, but anyway, both want to, quote, reduce the cost of higher education. Yeah, they're not even for free higher education. In other words, they're Biden candidates, right? They use other weasel words to avoid coming out in full support of tuition-free college and vocational training. If they truly support these policies, but voters or donors can't find that information easily, that's still a problem. These key details aren't in their emails. If the candidates support these positions, they must say so, openly, unequivocally, proudly. What I see instead is, quote, we need Democrats in the Senate, unquote. But why elect them if they won't give us the programs and policies we need? It's like planning a wedding for a marriage that will never be consummated. So I've begun replying to each and every email. Here's a sample of my responses for those who might like to try a similar approach. Of course, they don't look at the reply emails. They're automatically screened out from view. They don't let you reply. That's what's even more obnoxious. They want you to give money. They're asking for you to give money to them, but they won't even allow you the courtesy of a reply to their solicitations in case you want to put in a good word for something. Now, when they get big donors, they're happy to let the big donors make a contribution and tell them what they want. But for us little guys, they don't do the same courtesy, do they? Quote, if you want to serve the people, and I believe you do, the author says, then you must come out in support of Medicare for all, unquote. And he or she goes on to say, quote, Americans can concentrate on addressing the climate crisis when they can't pay basic medical bills. That's quite true. Please state publicly your support for Medicare for all, unquote. I will donate. Quote, I will donate as soon as you come out publicly in support of Medicare for all. If you can't work for this one necessity, what is it you think I'm gaining from your win? Unquote. Quote, you're not coming out in support of Medicare for all during a pandemic that is killing more than 1,000 Americans a day doesn't build confidence that you consider our existential needs a priority, unquote. If you want to serve the people, come out in support of Medicare for all and tuition-free college and vocational training, unquote. Please let me know when you come out publicly in support of Medicare for all so I can rush a donation to you in time to make a difference, unquote. Quote, I have limited funds and can only give to candidates who support both Medicare for all and tuition-free college and vocational training. These are samples of some of the replies this person has sent in. If Democrats want to control the Senate but can't even focus on these two core principles, what exactly are they planning to do for us? Perhaps it's not what they're planning to do for us, but what they're planning to do to us. Anyway, not engage in insider trading, not be mean. We need more than that, unquote. Quote, you must be bold to win. You must publicly support Medicare for all and give people what we need. Quote again, playing safe just makes you look weak both to Republicans and Democrats. Please take a bold stand and give us Medicare for all, unquote. And quote again, but Medicare for all is a mainstream position, though maybe not in the higher reaches of the Democratic Party. It may not be mainstream according to Rahm Emanuel, might not be mainstream according to Neera Tanden, might not be mainstream according to Joe Biden, but according to 88% of Democratic voters, it is mainstream, isn't it? That wasn't the author. That last bit was me. Quote, I cannot donate to conservative candidates, even if they're Democrats. Quote again, please come out publicly in support of Medicare for all, unquote. And quote again, a majority of Americans want Medicare for all. That means your position against it, by definition, is extreme. 88% of Democrats are for it. So by definition, your position is at the extreme of the Democratic Party. Anyway, going back to the quote, we do not need extreme conservative Democratic senators, unquote. Then quote again, I'm happy to keep receiving 30 fundraising emails from you a day, but each time you send me one, I'll remind you that I can only donate after you come out publicly in support of Medicare for all. Please serve your constituents by fighting for this essential program, unquote. But one of the candidates even sent out a survey to see what, quote, we, unquote, wanted our elected officials to do. Here was my reply to that empty gesture. Quote, I answered the survey as best I could, but it's concerning that although you asked for my top three priorities, two of my top priorities weren't even on your list, which shows they're not even low priorities for you. Quote, no Medicare for all? Quote, no tuition-free college and vocational training? Quote, if you want to serve the American people, these items need to be at the top of your list, or at least somewhere on your list. Quote again, we're in the middle of a pandemic. We need Medicare for all. Quote, before the pandemic, we needed Medicare for all. Quote, after the pandemic, we'll need Medicare for all. And quote again, we need Medicare for all in caps. Quote, you tell us you're fighting for, quote, our most fundamental rights, unquote, and yet you haven't come out publicly for Medicare for all. Quote, I really want to support you, that's all in caps, the one, but you've got, all in caps, to be willing to fight for this most basic human right, unquote. Quote, yes, I'm tired of the gridlock, but you're promising me up front that once the gridlock is gone, you still won't fight for Medicare for all, or many other essential programs and policies we need. Removing the gridlock is only useful if you accomplish something meaningful, and you've told me up front you won't get us the single most important thing we need, health care, unquote. Quote, tired of hearing about the Medicare for all? Quote again, we're not tired of hearing about it. We're tired of not hearing about it, sorry. Misread that. Do my messages seem annoying? Are they frustrating to read even in this short summary? Are they obnoxious? They certainly aren't even 1/1000th as grating as the message of tens of millions of Americans hear every day that our health, our lives, and that of our loved ones don't really matter to the people demanding our money. The aggravation of my email responses might generate is trifling compared to knowing we can't quit a hateful, dangerous job without losing our health insurance. It's nothing compared to the mental anguish underinsured Americans with no mental health coverage feel every day. It's trivial compared with the suffering experienced by those who can't even take a sick day, with the misery Americans feel choosing between treatment for stage 1 cancer and bankruptcy. These two candidates seem to have a desperate need for my financial support. I don't expect their staff and volunteers to have time to respond to my emails. But if the Democrats can't bother even to pretend to offer me the most basic of essentials now when they need me, why should I expect them to work for me once in office? As Elizabeth Warren once pointed out, when candidates say it's not the right time for health care, education, or jobs, they're being completely honest that they will not be fighting for us if elected. I desperately want to donate to Ossoff and Warnock, but they're not making it possible. John, by Raphael, you're running for Senate as public servants while promising not to serve. The fact that you're, quote, better, unquote, than your opponents is of little consequence if you don't plan to address our most urgent needs. Yes, you have some good policies. And we need you to stay firm on those. But we can't live on incremental progress. We can't wait 30 years to get the health care we need now. Medicare for all, and tuition-free college, and vocational training address basic medical, educational, and financial needs. both the requisites for racial justice. These are non-negotiables. Am I mean to pester Ossoff's and Warnock's campaign by answering every email they send? Well, there's a win-win solution to that. But Raphael and John, we want you and we need you, but only if you step up to the challenge. That was written by Johnny Townsend, and I believe it's very, very much to the point. So, hope you liked that one, that it resonated with you. It surely did with me. I've had the urge to write that 2,000 times already. Why have I never written it? Because when you respond to those emails, it goes to a robot and there's no indication anybody sees them. And I dislike wasting my time. But maybe this wasn't a waste of time for Johnny Townsend, because people like me are reading his post, and maybe we're live streaming, and maybe we'll get his post out there. Though I'm sure not in a way that the two Georgia candidates would prefer. Anyway, that's my problem. I haven't given any money to those Georgia candidates either. And if they ask me why, I would tell them why it's because you don't support Medicare for all, and at least one of you doesn't support the Green New Deal either. Those are things we need. So let's get to remaking the economy. That first one is really about remaking the economy too, because if we had Medicare for all, that alone would do a lot to remake the economy. It really would. Now, as of last year, I calculated that it would have saved Bonnie and I roughly $7,000 a year, okay, in medical costs. HR 1384 would have saved us that much. So, I mean, that's quite a savings for two folks primarily on Social Security. Quite the savings. Anyway, here's a piece by Ellen Brown, the public banking advocate, entitled, Why the Fed Needs Public Banks. But I want to call your attention to the following. This appeared on Scheer Post. Robert Scheer was the former editor-in-chief of Truthdig. Truthdig went kaput, I forget when it was, maybe 9 months ago or something like that. I used to read that publication rather regularly and always found some good stuff on it. But the publisher started trying to control them. The person who was actually giving the money to keep them going tried to control them and decided to fire Scheer. The main authors, including Chris Hedges, then said, hey, no, this isn't going to happen. We're going on strike. They went on strike. And the guy with the money pulled the whole publication. As far as I know, it no longer exists. This is the first time I discovered that it had come back in the form of Scheer Post. And the regular contributors to it are Chris Hedges, by Robert Shear himself. There, okay, is Major Danny's Jerson, who writes in the military affairs area, is very well known. Kevin Cooper, fairly well known writer too. Ellen Brown, Lee Camp, and Tom Engelhardt. All of these are very well known in progressive circles and well worth reading. So the regulars are well worth reading. And as we'll see shortly, some of the people who are not regular are well worth reading as well. So this blog by Ellen Brown was done on December 1st, 2020. And she points out the Fed's policy tools, interest rate, control, manipulation, so on, quantitative easing, special purpose vehicles, have all failed to revive local economies suffering from government-mandated shutdowns. The Fed has to rely on private banks to inject credit into Main Street. Private banks are currently unable or unwilling to do it. The tools the Fed actually needs are public banks, which could and would do the job. Okay, and Ellen, who I've been following on various publications for years, and whom I consider well worth reading, even though a fair amount of time I've agreed with her about, disagreed with her in areas of the mechanics that she often suggests. I always find her to be an interesting writer, somewhat on the margins, okay, of MMT, and okay, I consider her a friendly writer, okay, and one with a lot, okay, of good ideas. Anyway, she refers to Jay Powell and says, after he talked to Secretary of the Treasury Mnuchin, he was informed that 5 of the special purpose vehicles set up last spring to bail out the bondholders would not be extended beyond the first of the year, and that the Secretary wanted the $455 billion in taxpayer money back that the Treasury had sent to the Fed to capitalize the SPVs. Now that's not quite right. About $25 billion of that had been used, so there was roughly $429 billion left, or maybe $430 billion left, something like that. But anyway, Mnuchin wanted that money back. I also pointed out that that never had been extended in the form of any reserves to the Fed. There was no money involved. There were bonds that Treasury bonds that had been issued to the Fed as backing for these loans. The Fed, of course, was creating the reserves for the loans out of thin air, as the Fed always does. It always creates things, out of thin air, using the authority under Article 1, Section 8 that Congress gave to it. So, anyway, Powell replied at first that he thought it was too soon, but he agreed to return the funds. And we've been over this, okay, a number of times. There are good reasons that were offered by Bob Hockett and but Dave Dayen, that we should be happy about this, that it was actually a gift, because when he asked for the money back, basically Secretary Mnuchin was saying he was out of these particular lending facilities, which were created under Section 13.3 of the Fed Act. And so now the Fed was free to extend very low interest loans to state and local governments, okay, and to other people uh, under the authority given to the Fed on uh, section section 14.2 of the Fed Act. I've been over this, okay, a few times, okay, already. Uh, so, okay, I'm not going to go through all this, but what Ellen Brown sees here, okay, what she sees is that to use the authority the Fed already has, and she doesn't mention Section 14.2, but she says that uh, in order to exercise that authority, the Fed's going to need some agents that deal directly with the community to supply loan funds to state and local governments, okay, and to businesses. And it has to rely on banks to do this because it is not itself actually capable, okay, of doing it. Well, one thing she neglected is that the Fed would be more capable, okay, of doing this if it was possible to spread the Fed, okay, and Robert Hockett, okay, and Nathan Tankus have both argued that there's no reason why all of the regional banks, okay, of the Fed could not be extending loans to bail out the states and local governments, okay, and Main Street, okay, and Robert Hockett has pointed out, but there would still be agents needed, okay, as middlemen between the Fed itself and the state and local governments and the small businesses on the other end, uh, the other end of the activities, okay, of the Fed. That's where Ellen's suggestion here comes in, because she makes the point, her main point, okay, in this particular post is that if we had a network, okay, of public banks, they could perform the function, okay, of intermediaries. This possibility is mentioned by Robert Hockett, okay, as well. So Ellen goes through talking about inflation here and the Fed being unable to meet its target, okay, of inflation because things have been deflated, and it's very hard to get inflation simply, okay, with monetary policy itself. And so the question arises, why can't the Fed engage in creating helicopter money as was called for by Milton Friedman and Bernanke not so recently now? Where are the Fed's helicopters? And okay, in a recent article, where is it, Chairman Powell, Jeffrey Snyder, head of global research at Alhambra Investments, questioned whether the Fed's policies were creating inflation as alleged at all. And he said, where are the inflationary pressures? Instead, there's only disinflation. And he said, the problem is, that as Snyder said, quote, the Fed doesn't do money. Therefore, there's no way the Fed can have its monetary inflation, unquote. And Ellen asks, the Fed doesn't, quote, do, unquote, money? What does that mean? And Joseph Huber, chair of economic and environmental sociology at the Martin Luther University, okay, of Halle-Wittenberg, Germany, who, by the way, is one of the major critics, okay, of MMT, I've never quite understood, exactly why. He holds certain views in common, with MMT. For example, specifically, he knows the only monies the central bank can create and spend are bank reserves, and those only circulate between banks. The central bank is not allowed to spend money directly into the economy or to lend it to local businesses. It's not even allowed to lend it directly to Congress. Rather, it must go through the private banking system. Well, of course, it doesn't need to go through the private banking system, but it must go through a banking system. And of course, what Ellen is about to suggest here is that it go through a public banking system, which would be part of the Federal Reserve System, and that they then would be able to create bank money that would not be the reserves created by the Fed itself. They would be able to create reserves out of thin air that would not be the high-powered reserves that are created by the Fed. So that's what she's calling for here. And she cites 3 promising new bills before Congress that would facilitate the establishment of a public banking system in the U.S. H.R. 8721, the Public Banking Act, was introduced when? On October 30th, 2020. That's practically yesterday. It's only a month ago. Who do you suppose introduced that act? It was Rashida Tlaib who introduced it. It's almost like if there's a good act that comes into Congress, who's introducing it? It's Rashida, it's AOC, it's Ilhan Omar. Anyway, Rashida came in with this blockbuster piece, probably with some consulting from Rowan Gray, who has been working with her for some time, and who's a strong advocate, of public banking. As described on Vox, the act would foster the creation of public, state and local government-owned banks across the country by providing them a pathway to getting started, also establishing an infrastructure for liquidity and credit facilities for them via the Federal Reserve, and setting up federal guidelines for them to be regulated. Essentially, it would make it easier for public banks to exist, and it would give some of them grant money to get started. Great idea. Then in September, Senators Bernie Sanders and Kirsten Gillibrand, who likes to combine with Bernie on things lately, over the last 2 years or so, she's combined with Bernie on a number of things, like the Green New Deal, the Medicare for All bill. She's she's been going left, going left. The former Hillary protege these days is acting more like a Bernie protege. That's probably going a little too far. But anyway, she's been the most friendly, I think more friendly than Elizabeth Warren has been, in fact, of the people who used to hover around Hillary Clinton. But anyway, they introduced the Postal Banking Act, which they said would create $9 billion in revenue for the Postal Service, saving it from privatization. Also protect low-income or rural families and communities from predatory lending, like payday lending, I guess, and reestablish postal banking to provide basic low-cost financial services like check cashing, paycheck cashing, to those who cannot access the private banks. Then the third bill, H.R. 6422, the National Infrastructure Bank Act of 2020, is modeled on Franklin Roosevelt's Reconstruction Finance Corporation. This was introduced by Danny Davis, who is an Illinois congressperson and fairly progressive on certain things as well. Anyway, he had the bright idea of putting an act in that was modeled on the RFC, which was used. I think the RFC, if I recall correctly, was actually originated by Herbert Hoover, of all people. But it was used on steroids, okay, by Franklin Roosevelt, and it funded the rebuilding of the U.S. economy in the Depression of the 1930s. According to its advocates, H.R. 6422 will build or restore over $4 trillion in infrastructure. In other words, it would close the infrastructure gap which the United States now has and create up to 25 million union jobs. And a lot of them would probably be green jobs too, because of the kind of infrastructure created, while being revenue neutral, not burdening the federal government's budget. Well, I don't think, being revenue neutral is so important from a financial point of view. But from a political point of view, it could be very important, because as soon as you say revenue neutral to Republican deficit hawks, who will be coming back, they'll be playing deficit hawkism again in the new administration for all they're worth, trying to make people forget they were never bothered by the deficits of the Trump administration, never bothered by the Bush deficits either before that, only bothered by deficit spending for people who are served by the Democratic Party. Anyway, ignoring that bit of hypocrisy for the time being, they like other things to be revenue neutral. And this would be revenue neutral because it's financing going through a bank. The promise of H.R. 6422 and the model of the quote, American system, unquote, that inspired it, the innovative banking systems of Alexander Hamilton, Abraham Lincoln, and Franklin Roosevelt, will be the subject of another article coming out next on Sheer Post. So you can look for that article, because Ellen is going to publish it here at Sheer Post. And that does it for that piece. But what she's saying is that the public banks and these three bills would provide for public banks, could provide a lot of the funding that is needed to really get the economy going. They could do it on a continuing basis and in a revenue neutral way. They could be the middle agents that the Fed needs to make itself effective when it comes to fulfilling the other part of its mandate, which is to maximize, well, it is to reach, to support, and maintain full employment. It's supposed to be doing its best, okay, to do that. But one could argue it has lacked the tools to do that thus far. This article is about actually providing necessary tools to the Fed that would help to remake the economy. We're talking remaking the economy here. Now, before we go any further, let's really ask ourselves, what is the most comprehensive plan you've seen thus far in terms of policies, in terms of a policy agenda to remake the American economy, a detailed policy agenda to remake uh, the American economy. Susan Eldridge asks, who else was involved with this bill? I don't know who wrote it with her, but co-sponsors include the members of the squad, altogether 9 co-sponsors. I looked it up, a bit earlier today. I believe that Jayapal is also a co-sponsor. I forget whether Rokana, is a co-sponsor, but there are co-sponsors um, um, outside of the squad, including, I believe, Barbara Lee, I think, is a co-sponsor of that. And Evelina says the most detailed agenda is Bernie's. Yeah, I think the most detailed agenda that I've seen for remaking the whole economy in terms of policies and bullet points and what to do and all that. I mean, it's Bernie's. It's Bernie's policy agenda on his website. A lot of work went into that agenda. More work than I've seen in any other agenda. When you combine that agenda with methods of financing and new structures specified by the Forbes article we went over a few live streams back, by Hockett, by Robert Hockett. You put Bernie's agenda with that is very powerful, even during periods when you can't command the Congress. You can get started on Bernie's agenda in various ways using the authority of the presidency alone. And you can probably get enough political credit from that in the first 2 years that you can then expand the margins in the House, take over the Senate after the election of 2022 in 2023, and then go after the whole agenda. But I wanted to refer you again to Bernie's agenda at berniesanders.com. Look at it again. It is so detailed. It has so many great things in it. Now, the how you're going to pay for it questions are not answered very well, in his agenda. But when you combine that with the kinds of institutions and structures suggested by Hockett, when you combine that with the platinum coin, when you combine that with overt congressional financing, you know how to remake the economy of the United States. Remember, that would include federal job guarantee too, as part of the just transition to the Green New Deal. That's in Bernie's program. Federally funded, it would be locally based. It would support social entrepreneurial ventures, which could be cooperatives funded by the public banks. What if we expanded, the number of cooperatives in this country by 10 to 15 times with new local social ventures? I think that would really transform and remake the economy of the United States. It's all there, folks. We know how to do it. Next, here's something by Alexander Reed Kelly called Here's How We Remake the Economy. And you'll see why very shortly. This is a very interesting piece, and I'll share it with you. It's because it has one of our favorite people in it. The Fed's crisis response exposes the faulty logic of moralizing pro-austerity politicians and economists. And this was done on July 27th, 2020. So it's an old piece that I came across today because I was looking over SheerPost, of course. And Alexander Reed Kelly starts off with a little story. It has been several weeks since Valerie suffered a nightmare after falling asleep instead of suddenly finding herself at a grocery store checkout counter with no money. It's happened so often in the past, or under arrest for crossing state lines to find shelter with her children. She has dreamt simply of flying, traveling, but being alone in quiet fields and simply reading. Last month, Valerie caught up on her electric bill. She paid off some debt, tipped generously for grocery delivery for the first time in 6 years, deposited money into a savings account. In June, she gave her son the best birthday of her life, sparing no expense for a dartboard, an indoor mini trampoline, a box of the kinetic sand, and Lego minifigures for him and his brother. At age 48 and recently divorced, Valerie, who wished to remain anonymous for this article, is raising her two sons alone on a declared income of $19,270 per year in a small city in the mid-Hudson Valley, 1 hour north of New York City. She's one of some 39 million people in the United States who lost their livelihoods to COVID-19 pandemic this spring. She could afford her expenses and the gifts for her children because the federal government did something rare and wonderful in response to mass unemployment caused by the pandemic. It gave those who lost their jobs an additional $600 a week in weekly financial support to stay home and help them cover living expenses. Now, just imagine, folks, just imagine what the federal government could have done for Valerie and so many others if Nancy Pelosi had had the wit to hold Mitch McConnell up when he needed something from her. To hold him up by telling him no way he gets the money cannon until the $600 in weekly financial support is passed for the whole duration of the COVID crisis and for some time afterwards to give time for the economy to get back on its feet. But no, Nancy Pelosi didn't think of that. She didn't think of that. She just wanted to get something through quick. She didn't think about that. This week, however, the 4-month period of federal pandemic unemployment compensation stipulated in the CARES Act will expire, and those payments will stop. So remember, this was dated in July. Republican lawmakers have publicly considered reducing the benefits to between $200 and $400 per week, and of course nothing did get through, sending another round of $1,200 stimulus checks to taxpayers, and of course that didn't get through either. But Senate Majority Leader has shown no urgency for people like Valerie, who stand to lose between 50 and 85% of their income. I have no idea what I'm going to do, she told me over the phone in mid-July. I'm terrified to start cleaning Airbnbs again. I don't really have the energy, and I'm nervous to be in spaces where people from New York City have been. Okay, remember July, right? There wasn't much of this upstate then, but there was still a lot of it in New York City. I'm scared to bring the virus home to my children. And there, okay, is Danny Davis, who we spoke of just a moment ago, who was in favor of passage of the HEROES Act. Valerie does not have to imagine what it is like to contract COVID 19, though she was very careful to keep her distance from people, to wash her hands and avoid touching her face. She says she caught the virus somehow in April. As she waited to recover, her boys, okay, who are 11 and 12, took care of their mother and each other. Her generosity on her son's birthday was also a thank you to both of them for stepping up when she could not maintain their home and her future was uncertain. My 12-year-old cooked and took care of the cleaning as best he could, she said. He kept us afloat. Children should not have to take on that kind of responsibility, but they did. They were terrified. They never let it show until after I was well. 12 years ago, Valerie quit her job in IBM's Intellectual Assets and Property Division to take care of her first child, who was born with autism and four genetic diseases, three of which are shared by his by younger brother. The boys can have allergic can have allergic reactions to perfume and their own sweat, she says. She homeschools the boys and spends between 5 and 6 hours each day uh, 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 preparing food that will not hurt them. She regularly has to monitor them for reddened lips and other indications that a kind of silent anaphylaxis is underway in their bodies. They're the healthiest kids that doctors who treat these disorders have ever seen, so I'm doing something right, she beamed up proudly. Okay, quote again. I'm constantly looking out, but I haven't worked a proper job since 2007, so I'm basically unemployable. The boys know that their circumstances are fragile. Since the pandemic began, they've had nightmares they did not have before, Valerie says, including about the end of the world. And she says, my big guy is not talking to me as much. He says, there are some things I need to keep just for me. And I completely agree with that. Um, okay, and my little one has never been terribly articulate verbally, but he's more emotional, needy. He's requesting to spend a lot more time cuddling and reading and pretending to fall a lot. It's just not like him to do that, unquote. She lives in one of many places in the United States where people have self organized in beautiful mutual aid operations to help each other survive through the pandemic. She's called upon the group to get her prescription medications, supplies, her medical supplies, and health services. But before the pandemic, she rarely sought help from her neighbors. Quote, um, um, I don't bother people. I just figure everyone is going through their own shit show, and I try to get through every day as best I can. When she really needs someone to talk to, she calls her father, an incredibly bright, intuitive, and insightful retired blue collar worker who lives in the Midwest and whom her boys adore. Custody rules prevent her from traveling the distance that would be required to live with him or her sister, hence her recurring nightmares about getting arrested for crossing state lines. In the absence of a safe way to work and earn money, Valerie and her boys need the weekly $600 federal payments, or some large portion of them, to be renewed in order to survive. Okay, so I won't go through the end of Valerie's story, but she's upset because she can't even go to the Social Security Administration office and get the name on her Social Security card changed back to uh, 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 her maiden name. She notes the bars are open, but she can't have access to Social Security Administration employees for urgent business uh, because the government is, of course, trying to protect the employees. She complains they'll send children back to school, so the parent the worker bees or the parents can work again and make the gazillionaires still richer. And she thinks that is appalling. And she talks more about that. But the article continues and talks about why the unemployment insurance is so important. But it doesn't really end there or stop there. Where she stops is at the idea that things could be entirely different in the economy if people could have jobs during this particular period. And to learn about the possibility of their having jobs, the author Alexander Reed Kelly turns to none other than Pavlina Cherneva, to hear about the job guarantee. And I'm going to skip now to the section that goes there. Okay. To defend the $600 unemployment payments as both morally and economically necessary is not to suggest that the CARES Act is a sufficient solution to our problems, nor, says Pavlina Cherneva, who's an associate professor of economics at Bard College and a research scholar at the Levy Institute, and advisor to Bernie Sanders' 2016 presidential campaign, is the Democratic-led HEROES Act, which would extend the payments through January 2021, but if the Republicans and the Trump administration would support it. There's a picture of Pav, and the article goes on. What is happening to Valerie and tens of millions of other people fired, laid off, or losing benefits, healthcare, or housing is not simply natural. It is the predictable and preventable consequence of established government policy. Alternatives are known, and working people, organizers, activists, and voters must discover them and force them upon politicians and government if society and life are not to further deteriorate under pressure from the pandemic, a rigged economy, and worsening generalized fear. Um, um, Dr. Chernyva studies the impact of unemployment on growth, income equality, and public health, saving people from the hardship that awaits. Valerie is the focus of her work. In the case for a job guarantee, which she published this summer, she explains how the federal government could provide a living wage job to anyone who wants one. What follows is an edited transcript of our conversation. That is Kelly's conversation with Pavlina concerning the job guarantee. And the first question is, how did the weekly unemployment benefits affect the economy? Was it the right action? And Pavlina says everybody's focused on how the unemployment insurance is providing the greater income for a lot of people. Okay, and the debate is whether we ought to retain it or not. But the real problem is not unemployment insurance. The real problem is low wages in our economy. The fundamental issue is jobs and how poorly paid they are. Roughly half the workers in the United States earn less than $15 an hour. That is a very, very low level, okay, of income per generation. The floor is really rock bottom. But if, let's say, Valerie were to earn $15 an hour, instead of having $19,270 to live on, she would have more than $32,000 a year to live on. And there would be fringe benefits coming from the job guarantee program. In fact, the fringe benefits, in the case of the job guarantee bill, would most probably be admittance to Medicare. Free admittance, okay, to Medicare is a fringe benefit. Anyway, Pav says that is a very, very low level of income per generation. The floor is really rock bottom. Unemployment insurance pay is inadequate, and the job losses are uh, um, um, already caused by the pandemic would cause additional layoffs and other ripple effects. I'm talking about bankruptcies, people not being able to pay their bills, storefronts shuttering, etc. To stop things from happening, the government uh, has used this one-time boost of $600 weekly payments, and it was the right thing to do. It's a really good policy. In fact, it tipped the scales, but towards the least advantaged workers, that's a benefit, not a shortcoming. You have to appreciate the market is already so skewed. We already have such a high degree of runaway inequality. So using the average worker's income to calculate how much we should give to each unemployed worker as a supplement was a tiny rebalancing. I don't want to oversell it. The federal unemployment insurance is really just a Band-Aid, a patch. Okay, so now we have to decide what to do next. The major proposals are problematic. First, the Democrats want to renew the unemployment insurance boost. That's all well and good, but they don't really have anything else to offer. Remembering the real issue is jobs and wages. Let's think back to the Great Depression. FDR put a minimum wage in place, and a few years later, Truman doubled it. This is the sort of thing we have to think about doing now. If our federal minimum wage is $7.25 an hour, we have to at least double it to $15 an hour. But that's still not going to be enough. We'll still have mass unemployment. So we need a policy that creates jobs. But Democrats should defend continued unemployment insurance, but they have to offer something else as well. Now, Republicans, on the other hand, insist that we have to remove the unemployment payments because they disincentivize people from working. This is, of course, a cruel way of dealing with mass unemployment. It says, quote, Let's just take away the little support that folks have so they can go out and look for jobs that aren't there, unquote. Doesn't matter how many incentives they try to create or how much they attempt to flog people into submission. People won't find jobs that aren't there, and the jobs that are there won't be well paid. That paper by the University of Chicago economists supports the cruel perspectives that you're describing, says Kelly. And Pav says, yes, they say the distribution of payments is problematic. They imply the program is more unequal because lower income folks are getting a little bit more money, but they don't recognize that income today is already extremely skewed to the top. You can't argue the program unfairly distributes income without recognizing that the economy has been distributing income unfairly for a very long time. Says, I think it's disingenuous when economists pretend that they don't have a moral position. And but by the way, I think this applies to MMT economists too. I think that a moral position, that deriving from the notion of the public purpose, is implicit in MMT, that it's at the core of MMT, that it's part of MMT. I don't know whether Pavlina would completely agree with that or not, but I think she's the closest of the MMTers to agreeing with that position in print, except for myself, of course. I certainly consider myself an MMTer too, even though I haven't been one of the founders or one of their formal students going through school, going through their training. Several times on that paper, the authors claim, quote, we take no stand on how one should weigh these pros and cons, unquote. Of course they take a stand, says Pav. Their stand is the following, quote, these payments create a moral hazard, unquote, which is economists speak for, quote, they would make people lazy. They would discourage them from working, unquote. This is a value judgment, Pav says. Calling unemployment insurance a disincentive is a moral claim, not an economic claim. These people are fighting for their survival. If you suddenly get 600 more every week and you're able to pay your mortgage and you're not defaulting on your credit card, that's an aid in your fight for survival. These are the kinds of blinders that I think really need to be exposed. Economists pretend to have a neutral way of talking about issues, but moral claims and assumptions underlie every one of our models. Our models, by the way, has to include the models of MMTers too. And we have to expose them. Kelly says, our culture and the corporate soaked media don't encourage people to think about these things deeply, beyond appearances and the surface of their experiences. Pav says, right, but you don't have to be an expert to understand this. A lot of folks are saying that unemployment insurance is bad because it gives people more money. This has become a conventional talking point. You can look at this on the surface and say, quote, hey, somebody is getting more money than they got before, unquote. It feels unfair on its face, I guess, but if you drill deeper and ask why, well, then you see that an extra $600 per week is not that much money. Compare that to what rent costs each month in New York City. The $300 average that people normally get from state unemployment programs is not replacement income. It's not nearly adequate. If the $600 per week extra puts some people on top, then that really exposes how poorly some people are getting paid. Like I said before, less than half of American workers make roughly $15 per hour, and a whole lot of them earn even less. Even if you don't approach the issue of unemployment payments from the cruel perspective, even if you approach it from the desire to help people, we still have to drill deeper. At the individual level, there are real consequences to these programs for employers too, and we can't overlook them. And there's a picture of the cover of Pavlina's book, The Case for a Job Guarantee, which I guess I want to remind you again, I covered in 3 previous live streams back when it was published in July. He told me, I have to reopen the business and need to figure out who to bring back from the furloughed workers. On the one hand, I don't want to bring some workers back who were paid so little because they'll lose the $600 per week. If I don't bring them back, then they'll become permanently laid off. I can't reopen my business with 100% staff capacity. So someone's going to get cut. And it's the low wage folks. And they will become the long-term unemployed who have the hardest time getting jobs afterwards. There is a catch-22 here. Low-income folks might not want to go back to work because right now they can have the $600 extra. But if they want to go back to work, say at the end of this year, depending on when their benefits end, the economy won't bounce back to create enough jobs by then, and they'll become the long-term unemployed and face high barriers to re-enter the workforce. We want to raise wages, but from the perspective of a business owner, they're operating on razor-thin margins. Many businesses can't simply afford to pay double wages or match the benefits of the person who doesn't want to come in. On the other hand, there are so many unemployed people that if employers want to hire, there will be many more people desperate for those few jobs, and firms will not feel the pressure to offer better pay. So now moving to another question from Kelly. So continuing the unemployment payments alone won't ultimately fix our economy. And neither will taking jobless people's benefits away to force some of them to take underpaid jobs while the others find no work. What should the country do instead? Pam answers, what most people probably don't realize is that the government is essentially supporting the economy almost in its entirety. The CARES Act was $2.2 trillion. It was distributed very inequitably, but it was an enormous chunk. 10% of our economy. Yes, our GDP is like roughly 22 trillion. The private sector is on life support because the government is supporting it. The Federal Reserve is providing loans. Congress is appropriating more loans. And there's unemployment insurance. There's going to be spending on COVID and crisis control. But they're doing it in a way that props up a very unequal system, a system that is going to endure mass unemployment and mass devastation. When we shake off our phobia about spending, then we can start to ask better questions, starting with the question of what the government should spend its money on. During the Great Depression, the U.S. rethought the foundations of the economy with a New Deal. We committed to stronger wages, stronger employment, better working conditions, and stronger protections for workers. Today, the economy does not provide comparable economic security. We don't have universal health care amid a pandemic. In fact, millions of people who have health insurance lost it because it was tied to their jobs. So there is much to do, but we need to keep our eye on the ball. Abundant and better paid jobs. I would like to see the government create big and bold investment and employment programs to address all the neglect in our communities, including improving our infrastructure and greening the economy. To me, the Green New Deal is the clearest articulation of what the future society should look like. It rebalances how we produce things. It focuses on local sustainable practices. It has a social component, which means we're not going to just allow people to live in weatherized homes. We're actually going to ensure that every person has a home. Now remember Bernie's agenda. It's not going to be a world of homelessness with some solar panels. The government will be spending enormous resources to deal with this crisis. We can choose to use those resources to pursue a green agenda that restructures both our economy and society and provides the employment security and jobs that we need right now. And Kelly asks, when you envision that, what do you see? Pavlina says, so I work on the federal job guarantee. For me, that is a critical piece of the employment safety net. If you're an unemployed person, you will go into a public employment office and get a public service job. We will help you find work in your community. The job guarantee is a critical safety net and a critical component to the Green New Deal, which ensures that if we pursue this new world, everybody will have a place in it. We won't leave behind people in mining communities and towns dependent on fossil fuel extraction. We'll clean up and rebuild our communities. Contrary to what some politicians and private employers say, people want to work, but the private sector doesn't provide adequate jobs. So the job guarantee steps in to fill the void. Say you've been a stay-at-home parent for a long time now, similar to the Valerie example. I add, your kids are off to college and you want paid work, but where do you start? But your resume is blank. You could do some good community work locally through the job guarantee. In reality, people already organize themselves to work. In the mutual aid groups that have emerged from the pandemic, people are already doing work on the ground to address their community needs. You can make that the engine of job creation for the job guarantee. Okay? And the nature of work, the forces that motivate it, are fundamentally different from most of the jobs we have now. In the private sector, the profit motive ensures cost cutting and leads to precarious pay and working conditions. With the job guarantee, the terms on which work is offered is for public purpose and the public good. I emphasize that, of course. Now let's step back. The job guarantee might sound daunting. The obstacles might seem insurmountable given today's politics. We're dealing so poorly with COVID, but let alone other crises. But the thing is that nearly 100 years ago, in the midst of really desperate times during the Great Depression, we rethought the purpose of government in radical ways. This took a leadership. I don't know if we're going to get it now or if we'll have to wait longer. But this is the kind of moment we're living through. By the way, folks, we can't afford to wait longer. We need it yesterday. Yesterday. Certainly now. Anyway, it calls for the same kind of rethinking and bold action, Pav says. I don't have a crystal ball to know what will happen, but I keep thinking of the years that led up to the New Deal. This kind of rethinking, activism, and work on the ground was thriving for decades before FDR was elected president. From the early 1900s, even the late 1800s, this push for better working conditions was strong. It came from many corners of civil society, and the work coalesced. Now we have environmental problems, and it's a crisis that will only get worse. I see people once again challenging conventional wisdom. I thought 2008 might be the moment to transform government policy and to remedy the inequities in our economy. But our failure to do that, thank you, Barack Obama, that has brought us here, more unprepared to tackle this crisis and the hardships it will bring. Simultaneously, right-wing governments are seizing on the economic pain. We need democratic solutions, and hopefully we won't miss this chance. And Kelly says, the idea of a universal basic income, the UBI, inspires many people. How does the job guarantee relate to that? There are many different versions of the UBI, so we really need to be very careful of what we're talking about. I object to the UBI that just gives everybody $30,000 or $35,000 per year, rich or poor. Now, that's a UBI that would be very generous, okay? The Andrew Yang UPI is $1,000 a month, only $12,000 per year. But the job guarantee is far better than that kind of basic income going on. Now, there are people who cannot work and should not work, and they need a basic income. That's different from a UBI. Yes, it is. In the Green New Deal and the job guarantee, there is income support for those who should not be working. If you're a student, for example, tuition-free college is a type of basic income. If we have a universal health care, that's a kind of basic income as well. In my job guarantee proposal, I argue that it should be coupled with universal child care and universal child allowance, along with basic income support for veterans or people with disabilities. The point is, the income is targeted to the specific dimension of insecurity a person is experiencing. Silicon Valley advocates of UBI, not to mention right wing supporters, are pushing it as a replacement for the existing safety net. Andrew Yang explicitly funds his $1,000 a month freedom dividend by having recipients opt out of Social Security. I was under the impression, that Andrew Yang had maybe changed that in the later stages of his campaign after getting tired of answering that particular criticism. But I don't know. I'm not sure what he thinks should go on today. This should worry people very, very much. To me, the UBI is a Trojan horse and a false promise. It says, quote, I'll just give you income. Go out and find affordable rent. Go find affordable childcare, unquote. People who have decent salaries today already can't find these things. So UBI does not solve these other problems that we face. It always resonates more with upper middle class individuals. Working folks who are juggling 2 or 3 jobs want to work, and they want stable, good work. But the hate mail I get is usually from a college-educated person who tells me, quote, I would like to spend my life gardening. Why are you against the universal basic income, unquote? And I'm thinking, quote, well, I don't want to lose our hard-fought-for social safety net, and I want an economy that provides jobs for those who want them, unquote. All right, let me ask the question. This is Kelly again. The question that people always ask, how can we afford a job guarantee in the Green New Deal? And Pat says, I think we've done a pretty good job of debunking the myth that the government can't afford these programs. Remember, in response to COVID, we passed an enormous budget overnight. Yeah, $2.2 trillion bill. We did the same thing during the 2008 financial crisis. In these moments of crisis, the government musters the public resources, the fiscal power, and they pass a budget. I think we should always reject the question of, but how we will pay for it. It is quite clear that when a policy is a priority, there's no problem funding it. So first, and of course there is no problem, it can be done with trillion-dollar coins. It can be done with debt instruments. And if you don't want to do it with debt instruments, which I don't because they're politically toxic, it can be funded with overt congressional financing, that Congress just ordering the Fed to top up the Treasury spending account to handle the appropriation. It already has the financial resources. It pays for the job guarantee or the Green New Deal the way it pays for everything else, by appropriating budgets with the Treasury and the Federal Reserve coordinate the fund. I'd like to bring Congress into it so that the Treasury, the Federal Reserve, and Congress are coordinating the fund. Unlike the state governments, the federal government does not depend on tax revenue to spend. It is the issuer of currency. It has a public monopoly. And if you have the monopoly on issuing dollars, how can you possibly run out of them? And most people just don't focus on this very basic fact of life. The government issues the dollar, and every expenditure it appropriates through Congress results in an injection of new dollars into the economy. Yes, that happens when the government issues the dollar, and that dollar is deficit spending. Actually, whenever government spends, it's an injection of new dollars into the economy. But when government taxes, it removes it removes dollars from the economy. If it removes less dollars than are injected into the economy, then we have new dollars, in the economy. It's the net of spending minus taxes, or the deficit, that results in the injection of new dollars into the economy. Tax payments, she says, retrieval of those dollars. Taxes are not a funding mechanism. She's right. The funding mechanism is the appropriations of Congress and the topping up of the Treasury spending account by the Federal Reserve. So think of it like this. Votes fund programs. As long as you can muster up the votes, then the sovereign monetary institutions of the government, the Treasury, and the Federal Reserve coordinate to make all payments, except in the case of reaching a debt ceiling, when the Treasury cannot issue more debt if it needs to. Anyway, Pav says, but once again, the government will be paying for the crisis one way or another. The question is, will it spend and use resources in reaction to mass immiseration and environmental destruction, or will it spend them for prevention and the rebuilding of our economy? And Kelly says, this is a key correction you and others in the modern monetary school of economic thought have made to the conventional understanding of federal government spending. Ronald Reagan told Americans that the federal government must budget as a household does. In other words, the government can't afford to meet the public needs, and we can't have a wonderful society because the money isn't there. But as you said a moment ago, the federal government can't run out of money precisely because it issues money, whereas houses and individuals do not. And it's not just conservatives who think and talk this way. Enormous numbers of activists on the left do it as well. Yes, the progressive give up formula once again. Enormous number of these progressive activists say, yeah, we have to budget and we have to get taxes or we can't pay for anything. They think taxes do fund spending. Yes, frankly. Oh, and by the way, Heather Boucher, one of the people who was appointed to the Council of Economic Advisors, seems to think in this way. Jared Bernstein, I think he knows better. Okay, and Cecilia Rouse, I don't know about her. I don't know what she thinks. Okay, I'm waiting to find out. Certainly, Neera Tanden seems to think that the taxes fund spending. Anyway, going on. Pat says, yes, frankly, I find the positions of some people on the left to be baffling. Look, there are two things conservatives have no problem doing. One, they never hesitate to use the power of the public purse to pursue their reactionary agenda. Never. And they have been extremely clear from Reagan to Cheney to Trump. The deficit doesn't matter. We print our own money. But many, even Trump said that. Yeah, Trump did say that. Remember, early on, he said, we print money, we print money. He seems to have forgotten that now. He just froze federal salaries. Why would he freeze federal salaries? Because he's suddenly claiming we can't print our own money to pay for the federal salaries and give the federal workers a decent raise in the middle of COVID. Right? But many on the left refuse to acknowledge this basic fact and hide behind a fake respectability. By clinging to sound finance, they cripple their own policy agenda. So what kind of fight are you fighting when you don't have all the tools in the arsenal? The other issue is jobs. In desperate times, the right will have no trouble launching the punitive workfare programs for the unemployed. These programs will still be considered better than no jobs at all. What is the left's alternative? In my view, says Pav, it is the job guarantee. That is the alternative to workfare, a voluntary, decent public option for jobs. But many on the left cling to universal basic income, and some are clearly opposed to job guarantee. They might as well raise the white flag. One cannot strengthen the position of labor by providing income alone when the threat of unemployment is perennial. In fact, in a market economy, income assistance is a wage subsidy for the employer. Why demand living wages from firms when the government has promised checks? And of course, these checks will come at the cost of other benefits. Once upon a time, the left was steadfast in their belief that decent employment is a basic human right. Coming out of World War II, we believe that. Today, there's a kind of surrender to the idea that jobs are forever gone, either because of robots or trade. But there's nothing inevitable about unemployment. Of course, we can create jobs. Of course, they can be good and well paid jobs. Government guarantees all sorts of things in the economy, from bank deposits to education to certain types of loans or profits for government contracts. Guaranteeing employment is, in fact, not a radical proposition at all. The right has no trouble promising jobs. Of course, very much of it is false, of course. Trump won't bring back manufacturing jobs. But does the left have to offer a community? But what does the left have to offer a community that has suffered mass unemployment? Subsidies for firms, training programs for jobs that never come. Why not a job guarantee that creates decent, well paid employment opportunities that are not punitive and don't make existing benefits conditional on working? A program that creates useful projects that serve the public purpose. Democrats need very quickly to develop a very credible message and a plan for jobs, one that instills confidence that the government will take the necessary bold actions to create opportunities in every corner of the nation. We did it in the 1930s. We can certainly do it again. So overall, money has to be rethought. Government policies, and specifically employment policies, have to be rethought as well. How will we engage the power of the public purse? How will we use it to rebalance our economy? How will we clean up the environment, but provide care, guarantee health care, and decent employment opportunities for all? All of these issues go hand in hand. Sovereign spending, a public investment, and economic security. And of course, she's right, and so is Bernie Sanders with his specific policy agenda, a very important part of which is going to be the job guarantee, would be the federal job guarantee, and of course, the infrastructure on the financial side that is being proposed by Ellen Brown, okay, and Rowan Gray and Robert Hockett, also Nathan Batankis. That kind, okay, of infrastructure is very important to financing this all, as is the platinum coin, capability of the Treasury to issue platinum coins with arbitrary face values, and also overt congressional financing for financing all this. Now, I did want to have a chance today to go through one more thing, but I'm going to leave that to you. It's an article from Salon. It was written by Rosenberg, actually, Paul Rosenberg, a very good writer on the progressive side, who says Congress can wait, how Biden can reshape our future with executive action. He's following up on the day one agenda stories, okay, from the Prospect. He cites a number of writings from the Prospect here. And I'm going to leave this, okay, for you to read. Okay, it's a review of what has been done, okay, by others. Okay, it's a good review. Okay, it's a good summary. It's well worth your time, okay, to read it. But I won't have time to go through it. And I have other things to go through already accumulated for Saturday. So, okay, I will not try. There was one more thing I plan to do, which is not on remaking the economy, but that is on the topic of what should we do about Donald Trump There was an article in the Prospect by Alexander Salmon. And that article is entitled Prosecuting Trump is the Only Way to Heal the Nation. It was done on November 25th by Alexander Salmon. I guess I already said it was done by Alexander Salmon. And there's a picture of the Trump International Hotel. But, of course, the issue is, look at all of the crimes that Trump has apparently committed during his tenure as president. The issue is going to inevitably come up. Should he be prosecuted or not? There's been a volume of calls, since Election Day. The volume of calls calling for a Truth, and Reconciliation Committee has dropped. There are many magazines, outlets, writing outlets that are basically taking the position Gerald Ford did, with respect to Nixon, when the whole topic of a pardon for Nixon came up, in 1973, 74. And Ford made a decision, which I think was a terrible decision, which we are paying for today, because it created a moral hazard. When he gave the pardon to Trump, it set a precedent, and that precedent was that presidents would not be prosecuted for their crimes, but those crimes would be forgiven. That, as much as anything else, is what has led to Donald Trump and his crimes and his disregard of the law and the decision by the Department of Justice, which was a decision made after the Ford pardon, if I recall correctly. Before that, it was not the policy of the Department of Justice that it would not prosecute a sitting president. That was something that came about afterwards. And it's just a decision of the Department of Justice. It's not written into the Constitution. There's nothing in the Constitution that says this. Basically, the argument at this point, for doing this, is that so many people voted for Trump. 73 million people, or whatever it was, 74 million people, I don't know. 80 million voted for Biden. I don't know what the exact totals are now. Many more voted for Biden than Trump, but still, so much of the country voted for Trump, and so many people feel very strongly in favor of Trump that prosecuting Trump is thought to be something that would tear the country apart. And it's the sort of thing that's done in banana republics. I reject those arguments. Alexander Salmon also rejects them here, in this piece. As he says, but that conventional wisdom on the impropriety of prosecuting presidents is dangerously ill-conceived. A failure to bring Trump to account before the law would mark a profound politicization of the legal system, one that would call into question the legitimacy of our rule of law and notch a new low in its undermining. I have to add to that. I have to say, this whole business of presidents escaping prosecutions and being able to pardon people in their administrations who have committed crimes. This whole tradition of this happening, it's really been happening of right along. It happened in the Reagan administration. Seems to happen more in Republican administrations, than in Democratic administrations. Maybe because the Republican president, one who was involved in a burglary, was never prosecuted for it. But anyway, Republicans have come into office and tend to think they are above the law. And we see that. We see that. We see all these privileged people thinking they are above the law. They, over a period of 40 years now, more than 40 years, have called into question the legitimacy of our rule of law. That's what has notched a new low. If we fail to bring Trump to account, if we fail to finally try to turn this around, as Salmon says, the defining feature of a sickly democracy or a plain autocracy is that crimes committed by the powerful go unpunished. If the facts are there, the choice should be clear. Observation of laws is not voluntary, nor is enforcement of consequence predicated on who is breaking the law. All the world's bipartisan commissions would do less to heal the country than merely proving that the rich and powerful are bound by the same set of laws as everyone else. We need this for our democracy. I think we have to risk the tearing apart of the country to get this. If we pursue this and we can persuade people that the people pursuing it are being tough but being fair, if we can face down the propaganda machines that will be unleashed on us, if we try to put this through and have the courage to value the integrity of the democracy that we're trying to bring back, that we're trying to build, maybe that we're trying to create for the first time. The essence of that democracy has to be the same rule of law for all. So that's what I have to say, about this. I urge you to read this piece. It's a very good piece. I basically agree with the reasoning. I've added, a little to it, my own very strong opinion, on this subject. I do not think that Trump should escape accountability. I think he needs to have accountability. I really do. His actions have resulted in the killing of too many people, for us to be able to excuse his crimes. So I'm going to leave it there. I've left a link to this post too. I recommend that you go after it. And now I will consider your always good comments. And I hope you liked this live stream. And Alvaro says, it's back, in depth, meaning this live stream. Laugh out loud. Oh, thank you. Steve Gonzo says, hashtag stop Team Q is trending because Kelly Loeffler and also COVID Purdue. And Alvaro says, that's Casey, Q-A-Z-Y. Dolores Pierce says, hi all. And Kay says, hi, Dolores. Hey, Dolores. Dale says, hey, Dolores. And Kay says, I like this reply to them. Dems thought I was nuts when I asked the same about Biden. Whatever happened to candidates that worked for us? Well, I'm afraid that almost all of them died. We now have maybe 5 people in the Senate or 10 people in the Senate out of 100 that seem to be working for us. Maybe we've got maybe 40 in the House that still work for us. All the others are out for themselves or serving the donors, okay, or both. Alva says, "Oh, wise one, when will the moon be in the 7th house again and Jupiter aligns with Mars?" Steve Gonzo says, "Next month." Steve Gonzo, "I thought that will be Saturn stuff," says Avro. But Deborah says, "Again, I had to go to your page to get this show." Yes, but did you get the announcement of when the show was going to be on my page, Deborah? I made sure you got the announcement. Kay says, "Biden still isn't backing single payer either." Shake my head. Avril says, "That's a nice little chunk of savings, Dr. Joe." Yeah, it would have been a nice little chunk of savings. And how about for the last 5 years? That would have been a nice little chunk of savings too. How about if Medicare for All had been passed in 2009, okay, by Obama? How about if HR 676 had been passed in 2009? How many years would I have saved that little chunk of change? Avril says, "Same." Steve says, "There's a see first setting somewhere." Steve Gonzo says, "I get notified when Joe goes live." Avril says, "Steve Gonzo, oh yeah, thanks for the reminder." Avril says, "Thanks, Rashida." And Rashida Tlaib. Susan Eldridge asks. And Susan asks, "Who else worked with Rashida on this bill? I didn't hear their names." As I say, the squad was in on this bill, the whole squad. Also, Jaya Pal was a co-sponsor, and there were a few other co-sponsors. Altogether, there were 9 co-sponsors, okay, of the bill. Not too many yet. Kay says, "We need public banks badly." We do. Even though he says, "Do we really expect anything in the economy to change very quickly in the next 2 years?" I feel not enough will happen quickly enough to alleviate hardship or stave off collective despair. But maybe not, Evelina, but the power exists in Biden's presidency to take executive actions that can greatly relieve the problems we are having. And we may be able to get some Republicans to go over to our side, at least for some of the things we want to do. Like, for example, we might be able to set up the financial infrastructure that allows projects to be revenue neutral. The kind of thing, okay, that Ellen Brown and Hockett have been talking about, since that wouldn't involve any deficit spending. The Republicans might actually go for that. After all, they went for something similar under Herbert Hoover. You can't get much worse than Herbert Hoover. I guess you can. You could have Trump. He is Mitt Romney. Anyway, Avril says that ABC Act, okay, in my opinion, yeah, the ABC Act is a terrific act. The most detailed agenda is Bernie's and not even. Kay says, "I agree, Evelyn Napont." Susan says, "I feel so sad when I think what we could have had with Bernie." I feel sad too. I mean, when I imagine that it might have been Bernie who will be getting inaugurated in January, and what he would have done in the first 100 days. Now, he had a little video today in which he said what should be done in the first 100 days. And he was telling us what he would do in the first 100 days and what he thinks Biden should do. But I don't see how Biden can do these things if there's not a Democratic Senate. I mean, Biden has to get rid of the filibuster to do these things. And he needs a Democratic Senate to get rid of the filibuster. Kay says, Evelina says, I get mad. And Kay says, me too, Evelina Pont. They screwed Bernie and the whole country. They screwed Bernie and us. Us. Let's personalize it, folks. It's the whole country. We're part of the whole country. So we're talking about them screwing us. We should find ways to screw them back. Right?
Yeah.
Evelina says, Bernie's agenda needs to be combined with overt congressional action. We'll die first, to laugh out loud. Kay says, sad but true, my friend. Alvaro says, sorry, I initially misunderstood the topic about remaking the economy. My mind went to the COVID economy. Well, it's remaking it's remaking the economy, including the COVID economy. Not just about the COVID economy. It's about the whole economy going forward, including the COVID parts of it. It's looking like the COVID parts of it could be largely gone anyway within 6 months or 7 months. And it looks like recovery from the COVID economy into the new economy we'd like to have can start. It can start anytime now. It can even start if there is yet a relief bill of some sort, however small and skinflinty it's going to be. If it gets us through till the end of January, there can be other things. Evelina says, makes me mad, Kay. And Kay says, me too, honey. Evelina says, if I needed a remake, it needed a remake before COVID. COVID is circumstantial at this point. Remember last year. Kay says, Pay-Go-See is useless. Yes, I know. I was involved in some tweeting about that tonight. But Jimmy Dore thinks he's got this really wonderful, bright idea, which is that what the progressives should do is go to Pelosi and say, we're not going to vote for you to be the Speaker of the House again unless you guarantee a floor vote for Medicare for all. And Jimmy's really proud of himself because he thinks this is a really bright idea. I think it's a better idea to simply veto Nancy Pelosi, block her, force the Democratic caucus to come up with somebody who's more acceptable, like a Barbara Lee or a Karen Bass, somebody we can talk to. Get that and get the floor vote. That's a better idea. They got 8 people now in the squad. And enough people might support the squad, they can assemble 20 people. Nobody could get in as Speaker without those 20 people. I know it's going to be conflictful. I know the Problem Solvers Caucus is going to work the other side of the street. I know we're going to block people. They're going to block people. I know it might go round after round after round of votes until everybody's tired and they hate each other, and everything else. Then they're going to have to choose then they're going to have to choose. They can decide to split the party, or they can decide to work together under someone who is a consensus builder, really a consensus builder, not someone who just says, screw you to certain people, a consensus builder. I don't think Pelosi's a consensus builder anymore. I think she's just been kicking the left continuously. I mean, I don't think the left gets anything. Not anything. They just say, F you, or what are you going to do about it? Well, now's the time to show them what we're going to do about it. We're going to kick Nancy Pelosi's behind back to San Francisco. That's what we need to do. Evelina says, wasn't it somewhere in upstate New York they had to quarantine blocks and blocks of people? I don't know, I forget, probably. Kay says, Evelina Ponte, you have a job where you are? Evelina says, I can't teach the way I used to. She says, I rent out part of my apartment. Kay says, but you're a teacher then. And she says, sí, soy profesora de inglés y español. You're a professor of English and Spanish. Not bad. Kay says, not good there then either, SMH. Evelina says, nope. There got to be jobs in the job guarantee program for people who can teach English and Spanish. That's something needed in the job guarantee program. That would be a good job in the job guarantee program. It would be skilled in certain versions of the job guarantee. It would be at a better rate, actually, than the minimum of $15 an hour. Some of the job guarantee programs, like Hamilton's job guarantee program, they have, I think, 3 tiers, depending on skill level. Kay says, the whole capitalist world is collapsing, I guess. Evelina says, I'm concerned about the climate impact on the economy and just everyday living. It's just a matter of time. It hits hard. Evelina says, before. Kay says, yep, me too. More pandemics to come from it, too, along with all the other problems. Kay says, I demonstrated for the first Earth Day back in 1970. Steve Gonzo left a link to something. Evelina says, what's that about? It's Melissa Carone, Rudy's witness. Steve Gonzo says, what does Rudy's witness say? Now, most people would rather work. I miss working, and I can't physically do what I used to do, but I sure miss it. You might not be able to do physically what you could do, but of course the job guarantee is structured so that there are jobs for people who can't physically do what they used to do. That's the beauty of the job guarantee. It is a winner. Even says, I'm with the Bernie perspective all the way and Pavlina's angle. Yeah, Pavlina's angle is incorporated into Bernie's program. At least the job guarantee angle is. Now, the way of financing it from Stephanie and from Pav, Bernie doesn't talk about that out loud, but he knows about it. But he doesn't talk about it out loud. He's been too chicken to take on teaching it to people. Well, maybe now that he lost again in 2020, and he'll probably be too old to run again in 2024, maybe he'll think about trying to teach it to people, so by 2024, people will just accept that it's true, and he can ease the way for another progressive to advocate for funding federal programs using MMT knowledge. Maybe he'll do that for the rest of us. I hope so. People would listen to him. Alva says, University of Australia. Is there a University of Australia? I mean, I didn't know that. I know there's a University of Sydney. There's a University of Melbourne. I never heard of the University of Australia. found that anti-parasitic drug ivermectin was able to kill COVID-19 in cell cultures in less than 48 hours. Whoa.
Wow.
That's on the healthsite.com. I will look at the healthsite.com. I will check that out, Avril. I will check that out.
Thank you.
Kay says, thank you, Avril. Kay says, if we got single payer and SS expansion, I could afford to get a small car, maybe. That would be a huge help to me, and FJG might get me something I could help with. Well, I think there are going to be FJG jobs where you can work out of your home, so you wouldn't even need a small car. You might need a small computer, and you might also want to buy a small car, which, of course, in Bernie's program, in Bernie's great program, new, small, fuel-efficient cars would be financeable in part through grants from the federal government, but also through loans. Yes, solar-powered cars. Kay says Yang did change that a UBI would be along with Social Security. Yeah, he got enough static on it when people pointed out to him that if you weren't on Social Security, if you were like Donald Trump, you would get to keep the UBI. Okay, but if you had Social Security, you'd have to choose between the two. Didn't go down very well with people, that one. Steve says, Trump witness at Rudy's Michigan hearing demands photo ID because all Chinese look alike. Oh, great, great, great. What a witness. What a great witness for Trump. Steve says they're not even actual hearings. They're courtified press conferences. Courtified. Kay says, I think I had a part in changing Yang's mind on SS Plus by UBI. I said, so my kids who work and don't really need it will get it, and I can't. I need it badly. And he decided to change his mind. Good, Kay. Good for you. I hope it was you. Evelina says, a little help could make a big difference. I'm sure, Kay. Alva says, having Wi-Fi trouble all night. I hope that mine has been pretty good tonight. And Evelina says, sorry. Evelina says, Dr. Joe, didn't the war economy provide jobs in the 30s? I recall reading that in the 70s and 80s before Reagan came along, there was work. It did not provide jobs in the 30s because there wasn't much of a war economy in the 30s. But in the 40s, when we actually got into the war and began to seriously deficit spend to fund the war, the unemployment rate went down to 1%. We had tight, full employment then during that period of time, and wages began to go up, up, up. And people put away a lot of money during that period of time because everything had been shifted to war production, and consumer goods were not available. So people couldn't spend the money they were making on consumer goods, which turned out to be a very good thing because the explosion after the Second World War, the whole suburbia thing, which essentially created modern America, was funded on the basis of savings that people had accumulated during the war and cheap credit that was provided by banks.
Were they also buying war bonds?
Yes, that was part of the savings.
Yeah.
People were buying war bonds. Yes, that was a big part of the savings that people were accumulating during that time. Kay said, we need many, after all, they couldn't spend, so they bought war bonds. And Kay said, oh, And what war bonds really did is they didn't provide money to the federal government to spend on the war, because remember, taxes and bond sales don't fund spending. The Federal Reserve was funding the spending in just the way it does now. But what was really going on is the government needed people to drain money from the economy so that inflation would be lower during the war, because there were no consumer goods to spend on. There's a shortage of consumer goods. So people, if consumer goods were available, or, to the extent they were available, prices were going up. So the government wanted money to be drained out of the economy. On the other hand, they wanted to pay people money because they didn't want it to be forced labor. They wanted to pay people money. Kay said, we need many new green spaces everywhere. Adds to climate change, help, and also people's sanity. I could help with that in some way. You bet you could. And Avril says, Letitia James has over 60 cases to unseal about AGOLF on January 21st. Yeah, yeah, I heard that too. That's going to be something. Kay says, you're right on that, Evelina. Evelina says, even large greenhouses where presumably you could have fresh food and work all year round for people who want to engage in some communities. Right, of course. Evelina says, why the hell not, I say. Not only why the hell not, certainly there would be green jobs created as part of the job guarantee to do that sort of thing, Evelina. That would be the kind of job that would be created. Um, Aquaponics jobs also would become very popular jobs. Kay says, exactly, Evelina. I used to be a master gardener and had 2 of my own greenhouses before I lost my home. Avril says, Trump should be prosecuted at The Hague. Yes, he should be prosecuted at The Hague, but first let's take care of him ourselves. And then Steve says, Donald Trump retweeted a photo of this Nevada COVID doctor and called it fake because the beds were empty because it wasn't open yet. The hits just keep coming. Here's the doctor's response. Thank you for the tweet, Steve Gonzo. Evelina says, just Trump. Avril says, this country is already torn apart thanks to DT. Kay says, sorry, I scrolled down too fast. Kay says, I always say I've forgotten more about gardening than most people ever know in their lives. Certainly more than I know. I don't know anything about gardening. Evelyn says, talking about propaganda, journalism needs to take a long, hard look at their responsibility in all of it. They can't, okay, because the journalists have to work for people, and they got families, and they make a good buck, and they don't want to give up the good buck. And they have no defense against their bosses, okay, the plutocrats who own the newspapers, who own the big media. The problem is with the big media. We have to break up the large media empires and create hundreds of media companies again and prevent them from reconcentrating. In that other situation, the working press was much more powerful compared to the publishers. Working press people were able often to get their way. The publishers didn't interfere so much with the journalists because they could easily lose a good journalist if they stepped on his or her toes. Of course, primarily in those days, it was his toes. There weren't too many Hurtos around then. Avril Mano says, bar. Steve Gonzo says, all 6 of them? And Deborah Wilson says, yes. Steve Gonzo says, how many MMT knowledgeable reps are there?
Okay.
I don't know. I can't really keep up. I think the whole squad has some knowledge, but it goes beyond the squad. I think that Stephanie, Pavlina, and some others have had now so much contact with journalists uh, who in turn have had contacts with Washington people, okay, and representatives, that I'm sure there are a good many journalists who know what MMT says in basic outline. I'm sure there are many of them who think it's bunk and who don't want to hear about it anyway because they see it as reducing their power. But there are probably many others who are ready to embrace it at this point because it frees them. They don't have to tax and spend, okay, in order to spend. It makes them really more flexible. They can do better deals with the Republicans if they're not insisting on taxing the hell out of their donors. Time enough to tax the hell out of their donors down the road after we've gotten a lot of good things for people. Evelina says, Steve Gonzo, laugh out loud. Steve Uprin said, I was watching Dr. No on YouTube has released all 07 movies for free, binging. Yes, I've been seeing the 07 movies as I roll through YouTube to see what movies there are, but I tend to pick up on some movies that are, maybe comedy movies, maybe science fiction movies, or romantic movies. I don't, the old Bond films don't have the same charm for me they did uh, long ago. Long ago. Susan Eldridge said, who was the former Clinton person who worked on the bill? Who worked on which bill? The Automatic Boost to Communities Act? I don't, as far as I know, I don't think there was a former Clinton person who worked on that bill. Steve Wolfbrand said, binging. Kay says, yes, I saw Bernie's post today. I was talking about a video as opposed to a post. Okay. Steve says, I need a double win in Georgia. Probably ain't going to happen. It's Georgia after all. I agree. It's probably a low probability happening. I think there's a better probability that one of the two of them is going to win. Probably Warnock. He seems like he has a bit more enthusiasm backing him than the John Ossoff does. Seems to me John Ossoff of Peel, okay, is mainly negative. He's mainly running against Trump, okay, and maybe McConnell and Perdue's corruption. So I think those things are the basis of his campaign. He doesn't seem to be promising people a lot. Avril says, oh, what do you mean? Georgia saved us from fascist Donnie Tiny Hands. Yeah, that's true, but we're talking about the Senate races in Georgia. Evelina says, but I think the country can heal if right conditions were there. Don't you think, Carmen? Kay says, Mark Pocan said Gore is wrong. Gore is wrong about what? He's wrong about a lot, but what is he wrong about this time? Evelina says, Avril says to Evelina, obviously, and Evelina says to Avril, so the problem isn't how torn apart it is. Avril says, Evelina, my point was that tearing the country being torn apart if Adolf gets rightfully prosecuted is redundant because it is already torn apart because of him. That is true. But I think what people are saying is that his base is going to go absolutely ape shit if he is prosecuted, and that there's going to be a lot of bitterness, and violence, if the Biden administration tries to do that. And I guess what I'm saying is, yeah, that's probably true. But we're either going to have a nation of laws, or we're not. By ignoring this problem for 40 to 45 years, we've created this crisis. Now we have to solve it, and we have to work through it. If we just try to paper it over, it's not going to go away. The country is still going to be torn apart, but it's going to be torn apart under the surface, and we're going to start getting these cycles where the fascists are going to be coming back. And maybe one of these times when they come back, they're not going to be going away again. They're going to be able to grab control. We can't have them coming back again. We have to free this country from the threat of fascism. One of the things that has to be done in order to do that is to create a single system of laws for everybody and make it just and make it fair and punish the people who need to be punished, regardless of party, regardless of their power, regardless of their wealth. Susan says, Bernie has nothing to lose and his followers would listen. They would listen. Absolutely, Susan. That's right. He has nothing to lose now. So maybe one of the things he could do is support Stephanie when she tries to educate everybody. Steve says, melting ice caps could release pathogens frozen for thousands of years in case you're not depressed enough. Yes, I've known that for some time. That's one of the threats we face. That's why we don't have time to fool around for years and years before we get this under control. It has to be done now. It's much overdue. Evelina says, Avromano, I agree with that. I missed that but nuance. Steve Gonzo says, would you prefer cauterized? Laugh out loud. Yeah. Evelina says, Antonio Cal says, I do not understand why Facebook does not pay us, say, a Facebook guarantee program with all the money they have. Well, I understand why, because they want the money. They don't want to pay us the money. They want the money, Antonio. Then the Fed and Congress could complement. If all nations competed like that to pay people, we would all be employed. Well, I'm all for the suggestion that Facebook pay people who put content on Facebook. I mean, I think that's something that we ought to try to pass, or try to implement. But the one thing you need to learn, Antonio, is that we don't need Facebook's filthy money. We have a monetary sovereign, our government. And the monetary sovereign can provide all the money people need in this nation to buy the things that people have to buy. We don't have to go to the rich. We don't have to go to the wealthy for the money. The government has an infinite capability to produce money. Even Facebook and Google don't have that. But the U.S. government has that. And if we can control the U.S. government, then we have that capacity. We don't have to turn to the wealthy for the money. Steve says, that's why we're watching you, Doc, to break up the big media. Thank you, Steve. I appreciate that. Please get me many more people watching me so we can break up the big media. So Kay says, under Medicaid expansion, I can't own anything worth more than $2,000. That's why I can't get a car, and we need single payer. Well, I mean, I couldn't agree more. We need Medicare for all. We got to get rid of Medicaid. We need to have Medicare for all, no copays, no deductibles, no premiums, just Medicare for all, pure and simple. Evelina says, propaganda journalism is a bigly problem in Argentina, most of Latin America for that matter, and España with the new socialist coalition. España, rather. Evelina says, yes, España. And Steve Wolfbrand says, the HEROES Act convinced many people MMT is possible. If the government can pull $3 trillion out of their ass without even blinking, well, yeah, but they didn't pull the $3 trillion out because they never passed the HEROES Act. But the CARES Act was big enough should have been big enough to convince them. That was $2.2 trillion. They pulled that out of their ass, and they used $455 billion of it to create a money cannon at the Fed of $4.6 trillion. So if people were paying attention to that, they should have gotten the message that this government can create as much money as it ever needs. Kay says, my fav from YouTube is the old miniseries of Stephen King's The Stand. My favorite book, too. Never liked Stephen King. I don't know why I never liked him. I just never liked him. I think maybe it's because I like science fiction better, but just didn't like Stephen King. Kay says, Dora is wrong about forcing a vote in Medicare for all right now. Yeah, it would be much better to get rid of Nancy Pelosi and get in someone who we wouldn't have to force a Medicare for all vote out of. Someone who could be persuaded to put a Medicare for all vote on the floor, if only to pressure the Senate, if only as a political move.
Rashida?
Huh?
Rashida?
I don't think Rashida could get the votes for Speaker.
Oh.
There's no way she'd get votes for Speaker.
Okay.
There's no way any member of the squad is yet strong enough to command votes for the speakership.
Okay.
Now, I think maybe Jaya Powell might be much closer to that, but I don't think she's strong enough yet either. But I think Barbara Lee and Karen Bass, they would be bona fide candidates for the speakership.
I like Barbara Lee.
And I like them both. I think they're both good. But I like Barbara Lee too, yes. Steve says, Senate candidate's name in Georgia sounds like Warnock. Warnock, yes, Warnock. He's from Martin Luther King's old church. He's a reverend there at the Ebenezer Baptist Church. Avril says, let them go ape shit. We need a revolution. Steve Wolfbrand says, me too. Steve Wolfbrand says, Doc, I think Israel told Trump they're going to whack the Iranian scientists to fuck up the reconciliation with Biden, or did they do it on their own? At this point, but does it matter? In other words, they might have done it on their own, knowing quite well that Trump was going to support them on it, because they know the way Trump thinks, and they've got a very good into Trump anyway, because remember, Netanyahu's old roommate is none other than Jared Kushner's Trump's current son-in-law. Yeah, did you know that they shared a room when when Netanyahu first came to the United States? Uh, he stayed with Kushner's family in New York, and so Jared had to share a room with Bibi. Evelina says, "Oh, we can wait a bit. Shouldn't look like revenge or laugh out loud." Avril says, "Sacha Baron Cohen did it." Steve Wolfman said, "Read the Gunslinger series, 7 books, best Stephen King ever." Evelina says, Avril Mono, apparently it was Israel's drone. Oh, Steve Gonzo says, Facebook should pay me for all the aggregating I do. They should. Evelina says it was Israel's drone, apparently. And Steve says, good luck with that. Kay says, I read some of those, but not crazy about them. I don't like all of King's work. I only like a couple. Antonio says, to really remake the economy, one must go to college, learn a standard engineering, math, chemistry, or trade. It is only follow me, some will be lost in the way. Uh, we have a lot of college graduates here who have learned engineering, math, chemistry, a trade. We don't lack people like that. We can also train people like that very, very rapidly with our current system, especially if we make college free for people. That's not a problem here. That is not a problem. We need to remake the economy in the sense of uh, having jobs for anyone who needs a job, guaranteed by the government. We need to change the structure of the labor market so the capitalists have much less power, so the bosses have far less power. Steve Wolfbrand says AOC 2024. Cases people are needed to do the on the ground work too, Antonio. Steve says, yeah, I've read some King sneakers. Steve says, especially since they keep on jailing me for it, laugh out loud. Antonio says, I do not like what Trump did, but must confess the world asked for it. There is a lot of wrongdoing, abuse of power all over. A reaction is nothing to solve a problem. The world, I don't know what you mean by saying the world asked for what Trump did. I mean, what part of the world was asking for it? Were the people who were asking for it, and who were the people who were not? Doesn't seem to me the Iranians were asking for trouble with Trump. They had thought they had solved most of their problems with the United States, and they were settling down to normal relations with the United States. But Trump wouldn't have it. And the reason why he wouldn't have it is because Netanyahu wouldn't have it. Antonio said Israel is the case of a bad solution that went wrong. Well, at the time, there wasn't much of an alternative solution, and so it might not have been a bad solution if it had actually developed in a different way. I do agree that Israel went wrong during the 1970s. I think they went wrong when they occupied the West Bank and they refused to leave. I think they should have, as quickly as possible, negotiated a settlement with the Palestinians at that time. They shouldn't have let any Israeli settlers settle on the West Bank. That was very, very risky and dangerous move over the long term, and has been largely responsible for the perpetual war since. They'd beaten the Arabs really pretty good by that time in a series of wars. They were in a position to negotiate a generous peace involving independence for the Palestinians. They should have done that, and they should have offered, with the help of the United States, an economic package similar to a Marshall Plan before Palestine. And I think the whole history of that part of the world would have been different since that time. Kay says, Steve the Firestarter movie was made a few miles from Old House in southeast North Carolina. Antonio said, I mean, we need the PhDs. Kay says, no, we don't, Antonio. Howard says, thanks for tonight. Couldn't stay on track with the constant Wi-Fi disruptions. Have a nice night. Yeah, take care, Avril. Have a good night. Antonio says, all the world, many nations sabotaged the USA, still do. Some are allies. Well, we have to have a long discussion about that sometime. And Steve Wolfbrand said, nobody's done more Facebook jail time than me, but they gave up on me lately. Avril says, you too. Antonio says, I was talking before they were guests and took over with the blessings of Hitler. Thanks for the link. I will take a look at it. And Steve said, what's a will disruption? I'm not sure. Susan says, good night. And I'm going to say good night, too. I've now caught up. And I know Bonnie has wanted me to sign off some time ago. Marvel says, the birthrights should have gone to Abraham's firstborn son. And this conflict would not still go on today. Oh, Wi-Fi, laugh out loud. Avril, we don't even know if there was a historical Abraham. I mean, I think as of now, there are some people who are even debating seriously whether there was a historical Jesus or not. I mean, historical Abraham, that was what, 1,500 to 2,000 years before that? No, nobody knows if there was a historical Abraham. Kay says, thank you all for another great discussion. But love you all. We love you too, Kay. Steve says, the hairy guy. The hairy guy was Esau, wasn't it? Steve said. Avromano said I was kidding. Okay, good night all.